Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of the CostofCarry podcast. My name is James Chi. Let's get started. In the current environment with auctions seeing reduced activity, there is once again more focus on private treaty sales and in particular off-market sales. A key part of the sales process when using a private treaty is the offer and acceptance process. Understanding what makes a strong offer is not only important, it could potentially help you achieve a positive outcome and a successful result. When making an offer on a property, it's important to understand the implications of what the offer might look like to the vendor when they receive it. So, in this podcast, I'm going to discuss 5 things that a buyer may consider when making an offer. Number 1, understand the property's value. When a real estate agent lists a property for sale at a given price, they are generally going to use comparable sales data in the area to get a better picture of what the property might be worth. They will be looking at properties of similar sizes, age of construction, the land component and terrain, and also determining how much demand relative in the area there is for this type of property stock in the market. And the first step to putting in a strong offer is to know what the market is saying about this property, as well as who the sales agent is. And this is because monitoring recent sales and seeing how fast properties sell or how long they're left on the market and also what price they're being bought for is a real important factor in making sure the price is not only fair but in line with market expectations, so that there isn't a distortion of the local area median price or median value. Now, on top of that, if you are seeking finance to supplement your offer, making sure that you don't overpay will be an important consideration, because you have to remember that the valuation done for the mortgage might not be the same as what it is for your offer. So that's why understanding the property's value is an essential component to making a good and strong offer. Number 2, vendor motivation. So after, doing your research on realestate.com.au or domain.com.au, you may find certain trends that in the area or the local vicinity of the property that you're interested in, or the suburb that you're interested in. And you need to also take into account with that information or try and determine why the vendor might be selling. And look, this information isn't always available, but for informed or potential buyers, speaking with an agent is usually the best way to get an understanding of the vendor's position, because it's not always, you can't always read the listing and to see what the motivations are. But as a general rule, a vendor that needs to sell quickly for personal reasons could potentially be willing to accept a lower price to make that happen. And what that means is that you could acquire the property for a discount, which is obviously ideal because you would be spending less money as if you were to get it in an auction or under regular circumstances. But sometimes it's also important to know whether the vendor is, in the selling mindset. And like I said, although they've already gone to the sales agent, there can be some emotional factors that get brought in later on, and these aren't always in your control. So it's always important to have that line of communication with the agent, and always be realistic and I suppose open with your intentions of buying the property as well. Point 3 is to consider your conditions of the sale. So one of the big differences between buying at auction or via private treaty and between a private treaty is the buyer is often able to include a range of conditions in the contract, or for settlement, as well. So conditions are generally things like subject to building and pest inspections or subject to finance. But from a vendor's perspective, the fewer conditions you attach to your offer, the more appealing it can be, because there's obviously less uncertainty and hurdles that need to be overcome in order for the property to settle. However, a vendor is far more likely to accept an offer with multiple conditions attached if it entails a price that they want, or perhaps a premium in case there is multiple interested parties that have put forward an offer. So it's really like in the previous point, it's always important to speak with the agent to see how the property is being responded to by interested parties or by the market. And obviously, look, that the sales agent is representing the vendor in this case, so perhaps if you need a buyer's agent in this scenario, that's always good as well. But making sure that you have as many things sorted as you have up front and will create the least amount of delay and hassle for yourself and the vendor to achieve settlement, the better. Number 4, always put an offer in writing. Now, this may be somewhat obvious or self-explanatory, but an offer is always going to be far more effective if it is in writing. In fact, a vendor has no obligation to consider a verbal offer, so making sure that you write everything down, have your notes or perhaps your emails with the agent and the vendor, because as a buyer you could potentially even start negotiating against yourself if you don't have an offer written down. So always make sure to have, like I said, your notes and your conversations and perhaps your emails and also your contracts and offers always down in writing, whether that be as an email or perhaps as a letter to the solicitor as well. However that is best done in your circumstances, go ahead, because you obviously don't want to miss out on something simply because it hasn't been put down in writing and acknowledged. And lastly, point number 5, having finance pre-approval is vital. Like I mentioned in point 3, which was the conditions point, the subject to finance clause is virtually never going to be a deal breaker for a vendor. And that's because most people buying or selling a home understand the role that finance plays when large sums of money are involved. Now, obviously, for a vendor, that can be bridging and they may not have their finances ready in time. Perhaps, in contrast to an all-cash settlement or a no finance required settlement, maybe being able to acquire finance from certain lenders may be taking longer than usual, but having the finance sorted up front and being as a buyer who has your finance organized in advance by way of pre-approval is going to be something that you can use to show the sales agent that you're a serious buyer, which could help the deal get done. Likewise, pre-approval will give the vendor more confidence in your offer, which could mean that, if it's contested or there's multiple offers from interested parties, this could set yourself apart by making it clear that you have an intention to provide the money on settlement in full. The good news is that a pre-approval is something you can talk to your mortgage broker well in advance about. So whether you want to reach out to Ding Financial through our chatbots or online, this will greatly help not only us understand your time frame or your mortgage broker about your time frame, but we'll be able to understand and explain to you your borrowing capacity, or whether or not perhaps there is, a bit of a funding problem or a credit risk for this type of lend. And this can help you in advance before you start negotiating, because finance is an integral part of many buyers' tactics, because obviously you don't want to overextend yourself before you find out how much you can afford. So making sure you understand or have that pre-approval upfront is important in making sure that you do something that's sensible as well as appropriate for future circumstances as well. And that concludes this episode of the Cost of Carry podcast. Thank you all for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next episode.